Welcome, everyone, to the Meaningful Hearts Podcast, where we discuss the everyday questions that make us or break us if we let them. I am your host, Drew. Take my hand and let's walk this journey together. Welcome back to another episode of Meaningful Hearts Podcast. And today I have a special guest and possibly a new co-host. Yeah, I'm going to do that. Her name is Daniela. Daniela, say hi.
Hi.
We're going to do something a little different, something that we haven't done before. Obviously, having a guest and a co-host on the show is a first, but the element that Daniela brings to the stage here, she is what are you, Daniela?
A human being.
A human being that wears clothes and eats food and goes to the store to buy more. But better yet, she's a psychotherapist. Can you tell me a little bit about what a psychotherapist is?
Yes, I can.
Okay, you take it away. I'll sit here and eat Doritos.
A psychotherapist is somebody who you go see to essentially talk about whatever emotional distress you've got going on in your life.
That's awesome. So basically, on a large spectrum, we're going to have people who have distress get to hear firsthand from a therapist different issues, different topics, different things that go on in our lives. And not to say that, people are going to be calling in and speaking to us directly, but in essence, we're going to go over some topics and some questions, things that a lot of us deal with in our lives and maybe have a better angle on how to tackle them. I knew I'd do such a good job on myself, but I can't take all the credit because we have amazing conversations, me and Daniela. By the way, she's also my girlfriend. I love her very much.
It's Daniela and I.
Okay.
Just saying.
Daniela and I. Yes. And anyways, but yes, so we're gonna be doing a little segment today called Questions to a Therapist. And how this works is we're gonna talk about therapy. We're actually gonna get some of the fundamentals and understandings of how therapy works from both sides, patient as well as therapist to patient. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions, give you a little insight on what really goes on. Ooh. Yeah.
Dun, 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 dun.
Yes. So, Daniela, first off, how do you like being a therapist?
I love being a therapist.
What brought you to therapy?
Ooh, good question. So essentially, stuff that I had experienced in my life. I know that the reason why you decided to create the Meaningful Hearts podcast was to focus on self-growth and talk about life and how to better ourselves. And I know that for me, the main reason why I came into this profession was because I've been through some pretty dark times in my life. I've got trauma history. I've got abusive relationships in my past. And it was because of those relationships that, at one point in my life, I didn't want to be alive. And it was really, really dark, tough times. And as I came out of those relationships and I was working on myself and healing, I had this thought that if I could help anybody going through what I went through, that it would be really rewarding. So, yeah.
Honestly, that's probably the best answer. Having your heart in something, having a mission, right? Something that you want to do for the right reasons, as opposed to saying, "Oh, it's a job, it's a paycheck. I can get paid to do this." More or less, it comes from a really personal place, and I also think that it'll also help you really understand some of the people that you work with and kind of hey, I've been there, I understand. And
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I think therapy is different for everybody, but the way that I do my work is that I'm very big on building rapport and building a connection because, for me, in the dark times of my life, that's what I kind of wished for sometimes. Some kind of support system, somebody to tell me, hey, like, you're not alone. And I learned to understand the importance of building connections. And that's the main focus of my work first, of course. It then actually comes the work that we do. But before, off the bat, I tell my patients, my clients, first we work on building rapport because you have to like me before we can work together. You're not going to be receptive to somebody's feedback if you don't like them.
yes.
So we work on building the connection, building that rapport, and knowing that I understand that, hey, I've been there. Sometimes I even tell my patients, hey, just because I'm a therapist doesn't mean I'm immune to stress. I experience these things. Not to make it about me, but a majority of the time I get, wow, like, you're a person. Like, you get it. You understand. And I think what I've learned about people is that we all just want to feel important, like we matter, because we already feel like we don't matter. So it's through building that foundation that it really sets good, I guess, groundwork for the work that we do. Did that answer your question?
Very well. I mean, it really did. It touched on angles I was going to ask about. But yeah, I have, another question that would be a big one is, what kind of people go to therapy? I mean, there's always this stigma, right? This thing like, oh, the people that go to therapy are, out of control. They're whack jobs. They're real, there are certain type of people, like you'd spot them on the street. If you saw one, you'd know, oh, that person definitely goes to therapy. How true is that?
You know what? I understand this is actually something that I've actually talked about with some of my patients and even some of my colleagues about the struggles of the stigma that therapy still has. The idea that if you go to therapy that there's something wrong with you. I know that in my own Latino culture, I come from a really small hometown in Colombia, and if you go to therapy there, or if you have to see a psychologist or a psychiatrist, then you're missing a couple screws. And those are things that I've addressed with, like I said, I've addressed with my patients, that just because you're in therapy doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. I actually think that everybody could benefit from therapy at some point in their life, whether it's just somebody to hear you out, somebody to actually give you feedback, somebody to challenge you, somebody that is going to hold you accountable, and that you're not, it might hurt your feelings, but it won't hurt your feelings in the same way if, say, a family member does it or a friend, because it's different. But to answer your question, I've seen people from all walks of life. I've worked with a good range of ages. I've worked with individuals as young as 5-6 years old to people in their 50s. And everybody comes in for a different reason. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, it did. I mean, we can also dive into detail. Is it, weak individuals, or is it strong masculine individuals? I don't need therapy. Or maybe that people walk around with a facade all day and you'd think, oh, that person doesn't have a soft spot, or that person doesn't have any emotions. That person isn't feeling that way. There's no possible way that they could. And then they might come to you in secret. We don't know.
Yeah, I think that because the stigma still exists,
yeah,
that a lot of people, it doesn't matter if it's a male, female, young, old, the stigma, it's a fear, right? It's a fear of being judged, fear of like, there's something wrong with you. What's going on? Why can't you do it on your own? Especially in American society, right? If we look at the bigger picture, American society is all about individualism and, independence, and you got to make it on your own. And it's me first, me second, me third. But I've also come to acknowledge for myself and also in my work with my patients that you can still be an individual, you can still be independent, you can still be very brave, even if you're seeking outside help. You know, and I know that the stigma has changed a little bit since COVID, because COVID made a lot of us aware of just how important mental health is. So, yeah.
Once again, I honestly, I really did hit it right at the nail on the head. Right?
Is it the nail on the head? I'm not sure.
Yeah, hit the nail on the head.
Yeah,
I
think so. I think it is.
I think that's the way it goes. Well, I mean, in reality, most people will go to therapy, right? So all different types of people, all walks of life, all types of financial situations, poor or rich, right? All these things go on. What do you find the most difficult part about maybe helping someone? Like maybe you know what their problem is, but like you want to help them, but it's kind of, how does that work? Like, do you give them the advice? Do you fix them? Do you give them the answers? They grab them and then they go out the door and they say, "Oh, I got the answer right here. I'm good. Thanks for the, here's a tip here. Thanks."
No, absolutely not.
It doesn't work that way. No.
It doesn't work that way. I can't speak for other therapists because I know that every therapist works differently. It's really circumstantial. I don't give advice. I ask questions, or I offer either pros and cons of a particular problem that somebody's having, or we explore what's happening. But ultimately, I'm a believer that we all have the answers within ourselves. And sometimes it just takes somebody to believe in us. Like I believe in all of my patients. So when somebody asks me, should I do this or should I do that? Or how do I do this? How do I do that? I intentionally always reflect it back. Well, what do you think? You know, what's stopping you from being able to find the answer? And then there are other times where, you know, there's redundancies where I find myself in a position, okay, where we've built enough rapport, right? Because I want to build enough rapport with people where they're not going to get defensive or offended, or, you know, that's going to completely deter them because they might already experience that. They might already feel attacked in their life. But if I've built enough rapport with somebody where I can say, hey, listen, you know, you're stuck in this cycle and the only person that's going to get you out is you. And I think ultimately, to answer your question, that's one of the most difficult aspects of doing this kind of work, is that people want to feel better, but we get stuck in these vicious cycles of, I want to feel better, but sometimes I wanted to get better without doing any work. And some people begin to do it, but like so many things in life, it requires discipline. It requires like forming the habit. So yeah, I think that it's really about, we get into these spirals of all the things that go wrong in our lives or how stressed out we are. And it's really hard to come out of it. I mean, personally, I've experienced that myself, where I really find myself being in a rut, and I get frustrated because I tell myself I can just apply the things that I, you know, apply with my clients. But even then, then I realize, all right, I got to sit with this for a little bit. And sometimes it is about also sitting with people in the suck.
Sitting in the suck.
Yeah.
So, newsflash, everyone, therapists don't fix your brain and you go back out into the world. There's actual work that needs to be done, right? There's habits. There's things that we have to create. There's things that we have to continuously do in order to fix the problem. And I'm sorry to bother you guys and wake you guys up, but think about this now. Sometimes the problems that you have, or most of the problems that we have the answers to ourselves. So in essence, a therapist is a guide. They help you guide yourself through the problems. They're not going to give you the magic answer. And I think that's something that we need to look at, even in the direction of self-help in general. There are people that proclaim, yes, this book will help you. This thing will change your life. But in reality, it's, in essence, it's misrepresented because it's a method that if practiced and becomes a philosophy in your life, you can change your life too. And I think that we get caught up in that a lot of the times. And we think that it's just I get this, I just follow it, but I don't embody it and it'll just change me. And it doesn't. Am I correct?
Yeah. Also, in my experience, when you do give somebody the tools, or, you know, even in my own experiences, there have been times when I've asked for the solution, but then when the solution is handed to me, for some reason, it's not enough. Which is why, like I said, when people ask me, should I do this? How do I do this? I ask, well, how do you think? And if you can't come up with the answer, what's getting in the way? Because it's much more empowering to help people realize that they do have the answers within themselves.
Well said. She helps you go in there and dig it out and boom, there it is. And now that you know what to do, now it's time to practice it. And I got a question too. This one's interesting.
You've had quite a few.
Yeah, I tend to do that on a podcast. Who'd have thunk it?
Yeah, I love questions.
Awesome. I got another one.
All right.
So do you just get to pick? Like, you know, you go to the store and you pick the nicest fruit, the ones that are going to be the tastiest? Or do you have to actually, do you get thrown patients, or patients come to you randomly and then do you work with them or you don't? How does that work? How does the selection process work?
Well, circumstantial. I would say that for people who are curious about seeking therapy, every practice is different. Every place is different. In my particular work, when I first started interning, I was given clients to get experience. And as I've progressed in my work, I learn about myself. What clients, you know, am I compatible with? Because, you know, I think that people sometimes shy away from therapy because they think of it as like, I'm given this person and I got to stick with this person. And I can absolutely tell you and everybody listening that that's not the case. It's a relationship. Relationships is trial and error. And, you know, I've learned what I work well with and what I don't work well with. And same, I say the same. I've learned to say the same to my patients. You know, this is how I work. And you let me know. If you think I'm a good fit, we can try it out. And if it doesn't work out, we'll talk about it and we'll find a healthy way to end the relationship. And then I'll make sure that, or at least I'll try to make sure that the next person, if it's where I'm currently working, or if you decide to go somewhere else, still provide that form of guidance. In the beginning, it was, you got to take what you're given. Now that I'm a little bit more established and I know and understand, you know, even my limitations, because I'm still fairly new, I'm always learning. I'm not going to say, yes, like this is exactly what I know. You know, I try to keep an open mind. If there's a new experience, somebody with a new problem, I make a conscious effort to think, am I willing to take on this challenge? Is this a little bit out of my scope of expertise? Because I would never want to do somebody a disservice. And I think for the most part, the staff that I work with, and depending on where people work, if the staff that's assigning patients to the therapist, if the staff knows the therapist, they'll know what kind of patients to assign. I think that this applies more in like private practice though. In a hospital setting, that one I wouldn't know much about. Yeah.
That's awesome. Because I think that a lot of people are wondering, you know, am I chosen based on my problem? Can I work with certain therapists? Can somebody request you? Is that possible?
Yeah, I've had referrals from people that I've worked with in the past. And then it becomes a matter of, does the availability fit? How convenient is it as well? So there's a lot of moving parts that play into, I guess, choosing a therapist or whether a therapist is able to take on a patient. I know that the internet is such a wonderful place for so many reasons, but now a lot of therapists on like Psychology Today and
Psychology Today.
and other websites that have like therapist bios or like information. Facebook's got great groups for people either wanting to learn more about therapy or even just support groups, and then people connect in that way. So, yeah.
Okay. That's a really good one.
That was a good question.
Yeah, I tend to do that sometimes from time to time. I do tend to do that. So now, this is the tricky one.
All right, I'm ready.
Do you get emotionally involved in your cases? Or do you, just like doctors really have to not get attached to their patients because it compromises their ability to make decisions? How do you handle that? Because I'm sure there's a plethora of different scenarios, and some might hit home and some might not. How do you work through that?
That's honestly a really good question. Yes and no. Especially because in the way that I work, it requires me to have some level of emotional involvement. I care for my patients. Like, I genuinely care. So there does require some emotional component, right? Like, I'll give you an example. When I've been working about a year or so with my patients, I like to give them little cards, congratulation cards, and a little like reward or an e-card if I work with them virtually. And, that's an emotional involvement. But the excitement, the response, it's very rewarding for myself and also for the patients themselves. And the reason why I say no is because I'm still a human being before I am a professional. And as a human being, I have emotions and I have feelings. So when there's something that maybe comes up for me during session or when I think about my patients, I make it a point to say what's happening. I have to make conscious efforts to know and be aware of things that I've experienced in my life and that can potentially get in the way of being able to work with people. And I'm very fortunate that I can consult with other colleagues, people above me, my supervisors. So it's a yes or no question, but it was a good question.
Well, that's
Don't let it get to your head.
It's interesting because you always wonder what's on the other side of the table. Even when I go to the doctor, I wonder, what do they really feel?
Sure.
Delivering difficult information or making a decision. Like, do they allow themselves emotionally to get in there before they make that decision? There are some doctors, there are some professionals that it affects their ability to do their job. So they're straight to taking the shot. Yeah. They don't think too much, which is great. Doesn't say they're making the wrong decision, but they don't sit on it too long, because that's when things get really tricky, right?
Yeah. I can definitely understand. And I also think that it's like I said before, every therapist is different. When I was in grad school, a lot of what we learned was, you don't self-disclose because you don't want to make it about yourself. You want to keep it about the patient or the client. But that's not the way that I learned to do my work, because I have come to find, again, that from self-disclosure, from the importance of building that connection, it actually strengthens the rapport. I can't speak for other therapists, because there are some therapists who maybe, I don't know if it's out of need or if it's just for boundaries or whatever the case may be, that do have, I don't know if it's a wall or just a boundary.
A line, probably.
Yeah.
Or something to say, this is where I stand.
Yeah.
Just to keep myself at a certain point, at a certain distance, for the safety and the integrity of what I do, right?
Yeah. And listen, don't get me wrong. I'm able to say these things because there have been times in my work where I found myself being emotionally involved in a way where it was hindering the ability to be effective. And that's why I said now I'm at a point where I'm more aware. I have more of an understanding of myself, of when something comes up that I need to either discuss or consult with my colleagues, my supervisors, and so forth.
Wow. The world of therapy, things that you haven't known, that you didn't know, or maybe you're going to therapy currently and maybe you have thoughts about what goes on the other side. Well, your window into that world is here, and she's here to stay. So I would love you all to welcome Daniela to the show officially. She's officially on the show, and we have so much planned for the future of this podcast. And I thank you, Daniela, for taking the leap of faith with me on this journey to make the world a better place.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited. A little nervous, but very excited.
I could not tell looking across the way at all. Thank you all for listening, and we will catch you on another one.